Somewhere on Earth right now, a person is lying awake at 2 a.m., staring at a ceiling, wondering why their body won't just let them sleep. Somewhere else, someone is sitting alone in an apartment full of furniture, surrounded by people, and feeling completely invisible. And somewhere else, a doctor is telling a 40-year-old that his arteries look like they belong to a man twice his age. Here's the twist. None of that was supposed to happen. Your body was built for something else entirely. And for most of human history, it got exactly what it needed. This is the story of what we lost, what we're only now starting to measure, and why the cure might not be a new drug or a new app. It might be something your ancestors already figured out, 100,000 years ago, around a fire. Stay with this one. It's going to change how you look at your Monday morning cot. Picture your alarm clock, that harsh artificial sound ripping you out of sleep in a pitch-black, temperature-controlled room. You reach for your phone before your eyes have even adjusted. Blue light floods your retinas. You scroll for a few minutes, already anxious about an inbox you haven't opened yet. Then you get up, get dressed, and drive alone. Sealed in a metal box to sit at a desk for 8 hours. Mostly still, mostly silent, mostly surrounded by people you don't actually know. Now picture a different kind of morning. No alarm, no walls, just the slow lightening of the sky and a gradual rise in temperature that nudges your body awake on its own schedule. You step out of a shelter you built with people who are your actual kin. Someone is already awake, tending the coals from the night before because someone is always awake. You eat something gathered yesterday, then head out with a small group of people you've known your entire life, moving through a landscape you know by heart, doing something that will directly, visibly keep you and the people you love alive by nightfall. Same species, same genes, two completely different lives. That second version isn't a fantasy. It's how the overwhelming majority of Homo sapiens lived for the overwhelming majority of our existence as a species. And the strange, uncomfortable truth researchers keep circling back to is this. The modern version, the one that feels normal to you right now, is the anomaly. The ancient one is the baseline your body still expects. To understand how strange that gap really is, zoom out. Modern human genetics have barely changed in at least 100,000 years. That means the biology reading this script through your eyes right now is essentially the same biology that walked across Ice Age tundra, tracked herds by broken twigs and wind direction, and slept under open sky next to a fire. And here's the number that should stop you. For more than 90% of the history of our genus, humans lived as nomadic or semi-nomadic foragers. Agriculture, cities, factories, offices, smartphones, all of it is crammed into a tiny sliver at the very end of that timeline. If the entire story of Homo were a single day, industrialized life wouldn't even fill the last few minutes before midnight. So when your knees ache from sitting too long, when you can't fall asleep, when you feel a loneliness you can't quite explain you're not broken. You're a Paleolithic body, dropped into a world it never had time to prepare for. Which raises the question this entire documentary is built around. If our bodies and brains are still wired for that ancient world, what exactly did that ancient world get right? Not romantically, not as some lost paradise, but mechanically, biologically, what were our ancestors doing every single day that kept their hearts clear, their guts calm, their minds steady, and their communities intact? Because scientists have actually gone out and measured this, not guessed. Measured with CT scanners in the Amazon, with DNA sequencing in Tanzania, with movement trackers strapped to real human bodies living something close to the ancestral way. And what they found is going to reshape how you think about your next meal, your next workout, and your next night's sleep. Your body is a machine built to move, and it punishes you for standing still. Here's the bold claim. Sitting still is not neutral. To your body, it registers as a kind of slow malfunction. Start with the feet. Human feet have arches. Human legs have long, springy Achilles tendons. Human skin is covered almost uniquely among mammals in dense fields of sweat glands. And human muscle is packed with slow-twitch fibers that resist fatigue instead of burning out fast. None of this is decorative. Harvard biologist Daniel Lieberman has spent his career showing that this entire package exists for one purpose: covering long distances, day after day, without breaking down. Ancestral humans weren't the fastest animals on the savannah, but given enough time and enough heat, they could outlast almost anything. A strategy called persistence hunting, where you simply keep tracking and keep moving until the animal you're chasing collapses from exhaustion, and you don't. That single evolutionary advantage, endurance over speed, shaped the human body from the ground up, and it demanded constant use. So here's what that looked like day to day. Among the Hadza of Tanzania, one of the last populations still living something close to that traditional foraging life, researchers strapped triaxial accelerometers to real people going about real days. The result? Nearly 4 hours of light activity and over 2 hours of moderate to vigorous activity every single day. That's roughly 12 times more movement than the average American or European gets, not through gym sessions, through simply living. But here's what's fascinating. This wasn't punishing, grinding exercise. It was woven into ordinary tasks: walking to dig tubers, carrying honey back to camp, tracking, climbing, hauling. The body didn't experience it as a workout. It experienced it as Tuesday, and that constant moderate load turns out to be doing something at the cellular level that we're only now able to see. Every time muscle fibers experience small mechanical stress, tiny bone fractures form, and mild oxidative stress ripples through tissue, the body responds by switching on repair systems, antioxidant enzymes, anti-inflammatory signals, DNA repair pathways, a cellular cleanup process called autophagy, and a compound called BDNF that protects the brain against decline and diseases like Alzheimer's. Cartilage gets rebuilt. Blood vessel linings get maintained. In other words, movement isn't just calorie burning, it's a maintenance signal. Skip it, and your body doesn't idle peacefully. It starts to rust. This connects to something researchers call the active grandparent hypothesis. Unlike almost every other primate, humans live for decades after they stop reproducing, and evolution didn't design those extra decades for rest. It designed them for continued contribution. Older adults hunting, gathering, teaching, and provisioning grandchildren well into old age. Because human longevity co-evolved with lifelong physical productivity, the repair systems triggered by movement became load-bearing pillars of healthy aging itself. Stop moving, and you're not just getting less exercise, you're switching off maintenance systems your body was counting on running for another 30 or 40 years. But that's only part of the story, because moving your body was never the whole picture. What you moved toward, what you actually put in your mouth at the end of the day, turns out to matter just as much. Your gut is starving for something most people haven't eaten in decades. Here's the bold claim. Somewhere inside you, an entire ecosystem of microbes is going extinct, and almost nobody notices because it doesn't hurt. It just quietly raises your risk of the diseases we've come to think of as normal aging. To understand what's missing, go back to the Hadza again, not their muscles this time, but their meals. Their diet swings dramatically with the seasons. In the dry season, it's dominated by fibrous wild tubers, baobab fruit, and wild game like zebra or giraffe. When the rains come, the diet shifts toward berries, honey, and seasonal fruit. It's not one diet, it's two diets, cycling every year, the way it has for their entire history. Stanford researchers led by microbiologist Justin Sonnenberg wanted to know what that seasonal swing does inside the body. So they collected 350 stool samples from 188 Hadza individuals across a full year and sequenced everything living inside their guts. What they found was remarkable. The gut microbiome itself shifts with the seasons. In the dry months, it fills with bacteria specialized in breaking down tough plant fiber and animal-based carbohydrates. In the wet months, as the diet turns toward simple plant sugars, an entirely different set of bacteria takes over. The gut, it turns out, isn't a fixed machine. It's an adaptive one built to reconfigure itself based on what's coming down the pipe. Here's why that matters to you specifically. The exact bacterial species that cycle in and out of the Hadza gut are the same species that have gone almost completely missing from industrialized populations. Over 124 gut bacterial species common in the Hadza are simply undetectable in Western guts, not rare. Undetectable. The likely culprit is painfully simple: fiber. The Hadza eat between 100 and 150 grams of fiber a day, all from whole, minimally processed plants. The average American eats about 15 grams. That's not a small gap, it's a collapse. And that collapse has consequences. When gut bacteria don't get enough fiber to break down, some of them turn to the next best source of food available: the protective mucus lining of your own intestines. They begin degrading the very barrier that's supposed to keep bacteria separated from your bloodstream. The The result is chronic, low-grade inflammation, a slow-burning fire linked to autoimmune disorders, and metabolic syndrome. Researchers tracking populations in the Himalayan foothills found the same pattern in miniature. As groups moved step by step away from foraging from the nomadic Chapang to the transitional Raute and Raji, to the fully settled agricultural Tharu, their gut diversity declined in lockstep, along with ancient bacterial groups that had likely been part of the human gut for a very long time. But here's what most people never realize. Fiber and movement together point toward the same conclusion from two completely different directions. Whether you're looking at muscle repair pathways or microbial ecosystems, the story is the same. The ancestral body wasn't healthier because of some mysterious ancient wisdom. It was healthier because its inputs matched its design specs. And nowhere is that mismatch more visible, more measurable than inside the human heart. Between 2014 and 2017, researchers brought 705 adults from the Tsimane people of the Bolivian Amazon hunter-horticulturalists who clear forest with axes and paddle wooden canoes into a clinic for coronary CT scans. The results, published in The Lancet, stunned the medical world. 85% had zero coronary artery calcification, meaning no detectable heart disease at all. Even among Tsimane over age 75, 65% still showed a clean scan. Compare that to a large American cohort scanned the same way. Only 14% came back clean, and half showed moderate to high cardiovascular risk. This wasn't genetic luck. It was diet and movement, compounding for an entire lifetime. But that's only part of the story because the body wasn't the only thing evolution was optimizing. It was also carefully engineering something you do every single night without thinking about it: how you sleep. Your bedroom is fighting against a clock that's older than humanity itself. Here's the bold claim. The way you sleep tonight alone, in the dark, trying to force 8 uninterrupted hours, is something your ancestors would find almost unrecognizable. For nearly all of human history, there was no artificial light to speak of. Sleep wasn't a decision you made by looking at a clock. It was pulled out of you by the natural fading of daylight and the gradual cooling of evening air, a temperature drop that triggers the body's own release of melatonin. Waking worked the same way in reverse, the slow warming of dawn easing the body back toward alertness. Instead of sealed bedrooms, ancestral humans slept in open or semi-sheltered spaces, often clustered near a central fire. And they didn't sleep alone. They slept in groups which mattered for more than warmth. Here's what's fascinating. The idea of one continuous, unbroken 8-hour sleep block, the thing modern sleep apps are obsessed with optimizing, appears to be a historical novelty. Traditional sleep patterns were often broken into multiple phases, with natural periods of waking through the night. And researchers have proposed a theory to explain why that wasn't a flaw: the sentinel hypothesis. Picture a group sleeping around a fire. Not everyone has the same internal clock. Some are natural early risers, some are natural night owls. Under the sentinel hypothesis, that variation wasn't random noise. It was a built-in security system. Because chronotypes differ, at almost any given hour, somebody in the group was naturally awake or lightly sleeping, watching, listening, ready to raise an alarm without anyone having to pull a deliberate night shift. The diversity of sleep patterns within a community was, itself, the safety mechanism. That also meant sleep was fundamentally social. Falling asleep surrounded by people who would notice if something went wrong appears to have kept the nervous system calmer, reducing the kind of low-grade nighttime vigilance that keeps modern insomniacs staring at the ceiling. Nobody was sleeping in an empty room, straining to hear if a noise downstairs meant something. Someone else was already listening. Now hold that image next to a modern bedroom. Sealed windows, blackout curtains, a thermostat locked at a constant temperature all night, a phone glowing on the nightstand, and for a huge number of people, nobody else in the room at all. Every one of the ancient cues that used to signal it's time to sleep and it's safe to sleep has been engineered out of the modern night. It's no surprise that chronic insomnia and sleep-related anxiety have become so common. The body isn't malfunctioning. It's waiting for signals that industrial life stopped sending it a long time ago. But something even more important was happening once the sun went down and the tools were put away, because that transition from work to rest wasn't just about sleep. It was about each other. The loneliness epidemic is not a modern mystery. It's a missing ancestral system. Here's the bold claim. Humans were never designed to raise children, face stress, or get through a single ordinary day alone, and the isolation so many people feel today isn't a personal failure. It's an entire support system that quietly vanished. Start with the evening fire itself. Once the day's labor was done, ancestral bands gathered, and that gathering wasn't idle downtime. It was where culture actually lived. Elders told stories that carried real, practical information: where the water was, which plants were dangerous, how past conflicts had been resolved. Rest and storytelling weren't a break from survival. They were part of it, passing hard-won knowledge down through generations before writing ever existed. That density of relationship extended into how children were raised. In foraging societies, mothers didn't raise infants alone in a room by themselves. Child rearing was distributed, a strategy researchers call cooperative breeding, built on alloparenting, where grandmothers, aunts, older siblings, and other group members all shared the physical and caloric burden of caring for a baby. That support freed mothers to rest and forage, reduced the crushing energetic cost of lactation, and appears to have lowered rates of postpartum depression while improving child survival. And because so many hands were involved, infants were held and comforted almost continuously, a level of tactile, social contact that shaped healthy neurological and emotional development from day one. Fathers weren't sidelined either. A landmark study of the Aka hunter-gatherers of Central Africa, conducted by anthropologist Barry Hewlett, found that Aka fathers stay within arm's reach of their infants, holding them or within about a meter, for more than half of every 24-hour period, not occasionally. More than half the day, every day. Now here's the mechanism behind why all of this mattered biologically, not just emotionally. Human brains are wired to respond to physical proximity, shared touch, eye contact, and the sound of a familiar voice by releasing oxytocin and endorphins, chemicals that actively calm the body's stress response. In an ancestral band, that kind of contact was constant and unavoidable. Every day delivered dozens of small, face-to-face moments that kept the nervous system from tipping into chronic alarm. Compare that to a modern digital interaction: a text, a like, a video call. It connects people across enormous distances, which is genuinely valuable. But it turns out to be what researchers call a low-affinity social stimulus. It doesn't reliably trigger those same calming neurochemical pathways. The body can be constantly in touch with people and still register a lack of real connection as a threat. And the data on what that costs is staggering. A national U.S. survey found that 36% of all American adults report serious, frequent loneliness, rising to 61% among young adults aged 18 to 25, and 51% among mothers of young children. CDC survey data across 26 states found overall loneliness at just over 32%, climbing to 43.3% among young adults. The U.S. Surgeon General's 2023 advisory made the underlying biology explicit. The human body treats social isolation as a genuine threat to survival, activating the same chronic stress pathways our ancestors reserved for actual danger pathways that, left running long enough, accelerate aging and disease. But here's what most people never realize. Your body isn't distinguishing between "no one is nearby to help if something goes wrong" and "I have 400 online contacts." It's running the same ancient threat detection system either way. And when that system stays activated for months or years instead of hours, it doesn't just make you feel bad. It elevates cortisol, drives inflammation, and wears down the cardiovascular system right alongside a poor diet or a sedentary job. The ancestral world didn't solve loneliness through willpower or mindset. It solved it through architecture, through bands small enough and interdependent enough that isolation was structurally almost impossible. That architecture is what's missing now, not some modern character flaw. But something else about ancestral life deserves a second look too, because it challenges one of the most persistent myths about our ancestors: the idea that they had no time to breathe. The myth of the exhausted caveman. Here's the bold claim: your ancestors likely had more free time than you do. It's tempting to imagine prehistoric life as one endless grinding struggle for survival, every waking hour spent hunting, gathering, and fighting off starvation. But time allocation studies of foraging and horticultural societies tell a very different story. People in these groups typically spend somewhere between 3 and 7 hours a day acquiring food. The rest of the day, often the majority of it goes toward rest, socializing, tool making, play, and storytelling. Part of the explanation is almost embarrassingly simple. As Daniel Lieberman points out, humans never evolved to expend energy for its own sake. We evolved a deep instinct to rest and conserve calories whenever survival needs were already met, because in an environment where food could be scarce or unpredictable, unnecessary exertion was a genuine liability. What looks like laziness today was, for most of human history, smart energy management. And labor itself wasn't locked to a rigid schedule. Unlike the fixed 40-hour workweek, ancestral effort was episodic, tied to actual, immediate need rather than an abstract quota. During seasons of abundance, the time required to find food shrank, freeing up large blocks of time for crafting tools and ornaments, group play, and travel to maintain alliances with neighboring bands. But here's what's fascinating. This same task-oriented rhythm may have protected mental health in a way that modern scheduling doesn't. Finding food, building a shelter, resolving a dispute, these were concrete problems with clear visible outcomes. You either found the tubers or you didn't. You either fixed the shelter or you didn't. That kind of immediate feedback stands in sharp contrast to the abstract, long-horizon uncertainties that fuel so much modern anxiety, worrying about a retirement account, a performance review, or a headline about something happening on the other side of the planet. The ancestral mind was built to handle concrete, solvable problems. The modern mind is asked to carry abstract, unresolvable ones, indefinitely. So the caveman working himself to exhaustion is mostly a myth. What's real is something almost the opposite, a life with real physical demands, but one carefully balanced against deliberate rest, social time, and play a rhythm modern work culture has almost entirely lost. But this raises an uncomfortable question. If ancestral life was this well-matched to human biology, why does it sound, on paper, almost too good? The answer is that it wasn't. And the paradoxes researchers have uncovered are some of the strangest findings in this entire field. The paradoxes that are rewriting medicine. Here's the bold claim. Some of the healthiest hearts ever measured on Earth belong to people whose bodies are full of parasites. Remember the Tsimane, with their remarkably clean coronary arteries. Here's the twist. More than 2/3 of that same population carries chronic intestinal worm infections. In a Western medical setting, the inflammatory markers those infections produce, like C-reactive protein, are treated as red flags, strong predictors of future heart attacks. Yet the Tsimane, walking around with exactly those elevated markers, have the least arterial disease ever recorded. It's a genuine paradox, and it suggests something unsettling for modern medicine. Maybe the human body can tolerate certain kinds of chronic inflammation without decaying at the arteries. And maybe what actually damages Western arteries isn't inflammation in general, but the specific combination of inflammation plus a modern diet and a sedentary body. Then there's the missing microbiome, the same 124 plus bacterial species vanishing from industrialized guts mentioned earlier, now understood to be linked directly to a rise in genes associated with oxidative stress inside the Western gut. It's not just that we've lost some bacteria. It's that losing them appears to change the biochemical environment inside us. And then there's a paradox that reframes an entire modern diagnosis, ADHD. Some geneticists and evolutionary psychologists argue that the traits behind it, rapid attention shifting, constant scanning of the environment, high physical restlessness, would have been genuinely useful in a foraging context, driving fast exploration and quick resource discovery across an unpredictable landscape. Put that same brain in a fixed classroom chair for 6 hours a day, and the exact same traits get labeled a disorder. The wiring didn't change. The environment around it did. Taken together, these paradoxes point to the same uncomfortable truth. Many of our modern categories of healthy and disordered were built by observing people living in a mismatched environment. Move the same body or brain into the environment it actually evolved for, and some of those categories stop making sense. But it would be a mistake to walk away from all of this thinking ancient life was some kind of secret utopia. It wasn't, and the parts it got catastrophically wrong deserve just as much attention as the parts it got right. The honest cost of that world. If you were born into that ancestral world, there's a real chance you wouldn't have survived to read this sentence. Across foraging and early subsistence populations, roughly 43% of children died before the age of 15, infant mortality alone running up to 100 times higher than in modern industrialized nations. The causes were brutally simple: gastrointestinal infections and dehydration, respiratory illness, complications at birth, parasitic disease, all in a world with no clean water systems, no antibiotics, no modern obstetrics. It didn't stop at childhood. A small cut from foraging, a simple broken bone, an animal bite without sterile wound care or antibiotics, any of these could spiral into infection and death. Malaria, yellow fever, and parasitic disease took a heavy toll in tropical environments, and competition between neighboring groups over territory and resources could turn lethal. This is the piece the return to nature version of this story conveniently leaves out. The ancestral world wasn't gentler. It was simply matched to the body in the specific domains of movement, food, sleep, and social bonding while being ruthless in nearly every other respect. Modern medicine, sanitation, and vaccines didn't just add convenience to human life. They removed some of the most violent, arbitrary forms of death our species has ever faced. So the goal was never to go back. It's to notice, with real scientific precision, exactly which pieces of that old world our biology still depends on and rebuild them, deliberately, inside a world that has already solved the problems that used to kill us young. So what did we actually gain moving from that ancestral world into this one? We gained childhoods that almost always make it to adulthood. We gained antibiotics that turn a once fatal infection into a week of discomfort. We gained the ability to survive a broken bone, a difficult birth, a case of malaria. Measured purely in years of life saved, modern civilization is one of the greatest achievements our species has ever produced. But we also lost things quietly, without ever voting on it. We lost a body that moved by default instead of by appointment. We lost a diet that shifted with the seasons instead of sitting the same, stripped-down way in every meal, every day, all year. We lost a night sky and a cooling room that used to tell our bodies when to sleep, and a room full of other breathing people that used to tell our bodies it was safe to. And we lost a web of hands, parents, elders, neighbors, children, that used to make sure no single person ever had to carry a life. None of that was written into any law or any diagnosis. It simply drained away, generation by generation, as convenience replaced necessity. And your body, still running on 100,000-year-old software, has been quietly logging the absence ever since. In an artery, in a gut, in a sleepless 2 a.m., in a loneliness that has no obvious cause. The real takeaway isn't that your ancestors knew some secret you don't. It's that they never had a choice. Movement, real food, true rest, and daily connection weren't wellness tips to them. They were simply what a Tuesday required. You have a choice now to notice which of those requirements your life is quietly failing to meet, and to close that gap on purpose in a world your ancestors could never have imagined, using a body they built for you a very long time ago and handed down fire by fire, story by story, until it became the one beating in your chest right now.